the one who walks alongside flame, shall one day meet the road of destined death. This world is in dire need of repair, and death indiscriminate. I was born at the foot of the Erd Tree, where Mother gave me my purpose, though now everything is lost to me. I have to ascertain for myself the reason for which I live, burned and bodiless. My purpose was given to me by my mother, but now I act of my own volition. I have set my heart upon the world that I would have, regardless of my mother's designs. I won't allow anyone to speak ill of that, not even you.
Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
I see him crying from time to time. I think he misses his mother. He wants someone to tell him he's beautiful.
No, Mother. Forgive me. Marika, a curse upon thee.
Fire destroys and fire cleanses. Fire is rebellion, fire is feared, and fire is blasphemy. Fire is death. In the lands between, fire is the ultimate threat to the Erd Tree and the Golden Order. There are actually 2 children of Queen Marika the Eternal that were born of fire. These children of the god of the lands between were locked, erased, and forgotten because of their fiery nature. While Queen Marika saw most of her children as pawns in her designs for the world and the society she created, there are arguably 2 that are the most unloved and feared by their mother. Melina and Mesmer are the black sheep of the demigod family, the rebels among their siblings and inheritors of the fire that Marika fought so hard to eliminate from the lands between. Melina was born in secret at the foot of the Erd Tree. She bore a vision of fire and was left burned and bodiless. This caused her to be bound to grace. She was given a purpose by her mother, but as we find her, she has forgotten what her mother wanted of her. As we meet her in the events of the game, we as the Tarnished take on her accord to bring her to the foot of the Erd Tree in exchange for the ability to turn runes into strength. She trusts the Tarnished with the use and care of the spectral steed known as Torrent. The journey with Melina leads to Landel, the Erd Tree capital, where she then suggests the burning of the Erd Tree thorns using the flame of ruin from the mountaintops of the giants. The journey with Melina ends with her burning herself as kindling to set the Erd Tree aflame to allow passage inside, fulfilling her purpose. However, if the Tarnished decides to use the flame of frenzy as kindling, Melina will return, vowing to hunt the Tarnished in the form of destined death, revealing her sealed eye and perhaps her true nature. The second child of Marika who bore a vision of fire was Mesmer, the impaler. He, much like Marika's other children, was born cursed. In his case, he was cursed by a dark serpent that threatened to completely take hold of him. Marika attempted to remedy this affliction by removing Mesmer's right eye, replacing it with the seal of her grace. To aid in further suppression of the base serpent, Mesmer was in constant company with 2 winged serpents. They appear to be conjoined to his body as we see him in-game. Mesmer despised his curse and his fire affliction. He had hopes that one day he could rid himself of it, yet the fire still burned. Mesmer's task from his mother was to purge the horn scent from the land of shadow as vengeance for Marika and her shaman people. Eventually, Marika would cut off all contact with Mesmer and abandon him in the Shadow Realm. Mesmer would continue his crusade despite the lack of contact from his mother. He would eventually reside in Shadow Keep, where he is eventually defeated by the Tarnished and cursing his mother before his death. Melina and Mesmer's relationship was revealed through the Mesmer's kindling item description, which states, "The kindling that burned inside Mesmer the Impaler, a dark thing eaten away by a wicked serpent, Mesmer, much like his younger sister, bore a vision of fire. This can be inferred that Mesmer's younger sister must be Melina, considering no other children of Marika are associated with fire inherently. The item description mentions specifically that a younger sister bore the vision of fire, going against my original theory of the two of them being twins before the DLC launched. This also hints at the older brother type figure that Mesmer assumed among his siblings, which also is highlighted by the remembrance of the wild boar rider. This item description also makes a point to highlight Mesmer was an older brother figure to Radahn as well. While I don't think Melina and Mesmer knew of each other's existence, Mesmer did assume the role of older sibling to Marika's other children. Both Melina and Mesmer also have their associated butterflies, the smoldering butterfly and the black pyrefly, respectively. The smoldering butterfly has a more traditional flame, while the black pyrefly has Mesmer's distinct black and dark red type of fire. The only other children of Marika that have associated butterflies are Mikola and Melina, with the Aeonian and nascent butterflies respectively. Mikola and Melina are born of Radagon and Marika, so perhaps the butterflies are only associated with children of Marika and Radagon. That same logic can be applied to Melina and Mesmer as well, making them both children of Marika and Radagon, since Melina and Mesmer's father is not mentioned. Both Melina and Mesmer were kept secret to some extent. No other demigods acknowledge or know of Melina's existence, aside from potentially Ranni, who mentions Torn's former master. Mesmer seems to have had more of a relationship with at least Radahn and likely the other siblings. His secrecy was more likely brought upon later in his life. While from a design perspective the base game does not reference Mesmer, we can assume that within the lore that the other siblings and the culture of the Lands Between do not reference Mesmer because of his association to fire and his affliction with the Abyssal Serpent. Melina seems to have been a secret from the very start of her existence, probably to set her up for her ultimate purpose. I personally see Mesmer as the original Blasphemy established by Marika. Fire is often seen as a direct threat to the Erdtree and the Golden Order by association. The fire giants may not have been the first time Marika saw fire as a direct threat. Perhaps that initial fear of fire came from her own son instead, since it is possible he was born before the war with the giants. Rykard might have taken inspiration from his older half-brother through his blasphemy and rebellion against the Erdtree. The act of feeding himself to the god-devouring serpent might have been a nod to the original blasphemer Mesmer and his affliction with the Abyssal Serpent. There is no concrete information on if Rykard knew of Mesmer's existence, but if Mesmer played a role as older brother to Radahn, according to item descriptions, Rykard's brother, then it's likely he knew of Mesmer as well. Melina might have been kept secret due to her speculated original identity as the Glomide Queen. Again, this could be a case where a child of Marika represented a direct threat to her rule. Melina could have also been kept a secret simply as a failsafe to repair the world, since she could serve as a kindling maiden. Perhaps she was kept away from the world as a plan for Marika should the worst come to worst. While not clearly stated, it is likely that both Melina and Mesmer are the children of Marika and Radagon. They aren't twins like Mikola and Melina, but share similar facial structure and shades of red hair. The red hair likely makes Radagon the father of both of them. It can also be assumed that both Melina and Mesmer are cursed, like many of Marika's children. Both Melina and Mesmer have seals on one of their eyes to contain a power or second entity. Mesmer's eye was replaced with the seal of Marika's grace that was meant to contain the Abyssal Serpent that was working to absorb him. Melina also is likely to have been cursed as well, where she has one of her eyes sealed, but in her case, her eye has a claw mark covering it. In my view, I find that it is likely that Malekith actually sealed Melina's eye instead of Marika, due to the association with the Glomide Queen and destined death. Had Marika sealed Melina's eye, she might have used one of her runes just like she did with Mesmer, but in her case, the claw mark points to Malekith in my opinion. Melina's true nature is revealed if the tarnish burns the Erdtree with the flame of frenzy. Both siblings essentially contain a second identity, much like Mikola and Melina. Mikola with Saint Trina, Melina with the goddess of rot, Mesmer with the Abyssal Serpent, and Melina with the Globe-Eyed Queen, presumably. Mesmer is likely the firstborn of Marika, since he played the role of older brother to Radahn. My personal theory is that Mesmer was Marika's first child, and when he was born cursed, she decided to partner with Godfrey instead in the hopes that her children might not be cursed. She might have assumed that the curse affliction of her son was due to her partnership with Radagon. Godwyn, in my view, might be the second-born, but known as the firstborn publicly by the inhabitants of the lands between. To me, Godwyn seems like the ideal version of what Marika had in mind for Messmer. He is perfect and well loved by Marika and respected by all, whereas Messmer seems like the edgy brother nobody talks about. Godwyn in many ways is the ideal son that Messmer could never be. Marika might have been relieved to see Godwyn born unaffected by a curse, however that wasn't apparent until his death. Her having Mohg and Morgoth presumably after Godwyn, of course, would have brought on those same feelings she had with Messmer and therefore locked them away as well. Mesmer in many ways could be interpreted as the catalyst for the poor treatment Marika had for her children following if he is read as the firstborn. Mesmer and Melina also did not participate in the shattering. Melina was kept a secret from everyone, so her lack of involvement is rather obvious. Mesmer seems to be uninvolved due to a few potential reasons. The first reason might be he was trapped in the Shadow Realm before the shattering occurred. Another being he simply did not have a great rune of his own and therefore felt no need to fight for greater power. It's interesting that he, out of all other siblings, did not receive a rune. He could have broken his rune much like Miquella did, he could have flat out refused one altogether, or was not given one due to Marika's disdain for him. The Marika's rune in his eye could have been the only gift he ever would accept, and for good reason. Mesmer might have been much more powerful than the other demigods and saw the infighting beneath him. It's still unclear if the shattering occurred during Mesmer's crusade, so that might have taken up his time and attention as well. Mesmer seems to harbor no hatred for his siblings, since he does not chase after Miquella. There's even cut dialogue of Mesmer referencing Miquella, stating, "Miquella spoke of thee." This might have been cut simply to refrain from the idea that he was charmed by Miquella, but it's anyone's guess at this point why this was removed. Mesmer, much like Miquella, accepted those who were shunned and different like Gaius. Perhaps Mesmer would have made for the best replacement for Marika, since his love and acceptance of others wasn't part of a charm or means for gain like Miquella's motives. Mesmer also appears to love his mother until his dying breath. Even though the defaced statues of Marika litter the realm of shadow, he still keeps one intact in his room in Shadow Keep. The statue in Shadow Keep is particularly interesting because it depicts Marika holding a child. That child could possibly be Mesmer himself. Mesmer also says, "Forgive me," when removing the rune from his eye, indicating his continued respect for her. Even though he was abandoned by her, he still respects and loves her. Similarly, Melina might still love or respect Marika as well, since she works to fulfill the purpose that was given to her, even if she goes against her mother's designs to some extent. At the end of the day, she still works to honor her mother's wishes. Both Melina and Mesmer seem to exhibit some emotional connection to Marika, while the other children of Marika specifically seem to be completely consumed by their infighting save for Morgoth. Both Melina and Mesmer, while still exhibiting a small amount of respect for their mother, are still rebels by nature. Melina claims to act of her own volition despite her mother's designs. While this might go against the idea that Melina respects Marika to a degree, she still fulfills her ultimate purpose, perhaps just not as her mother intended. Mesmer was likely locked away because of his very rebellious nature, besides simply being associated with fire and containing the abyssal serpent. He also seems entirely disinterested with power in general, while the other siblings were power-hungry from the very start of the shattering. Marika stoked those flames early with her stating that her children needed to make something of themselves or amount only to sacrifices, according to Melina's dialogue. From a design perspective, both Melina and Mesmer are still rather mysterious compared to the other demigods. There are still a lot of loose ends for both of them, to the point where simple details like their time of birth and the greater events would answer a lot of questions. Both, in my view, still lack a clear conclusion, especially Melina. Melina's character wasn't expanded upon in the DLC aside from Mesmer's kindling item description. Mesmer, despite being the poster boy for the DLC, did not receive much attention either. While this isn't to say that the writing and lore of the DLC is bad, it only seems to murky the waters of Marika's children even more. Interestingly, both Melina and Mesmer act as the respective MacGuffins of the base game and DLC. Melina is used as a plot and gameplay device to accelerate or unlock certain areas at given choke points. After defeating Morgoth, she gives the Tarnished the rolled medallion to reach the mountaintops of the giants, and also acts as kindling to light the Erd Tree aflame using the Flame of Ruin. She, much like the Emerald Herald from DS2, is essentially the key to reaching the climax of the story and gameplay progression. While not having as much interaction with the player as Melina, Messmer acts as the DLC's MacGuffin in similar fashion. His kindling is needed to burn the sealing thorns from any limb so that the Tarnished can reach Miquella at the Gate of Divinity. Much like Melina, interacting with Messmer, or in his case defeating him, is the key to moving the plot and gameplay forward. The use of fire to burn seals/thorns is conducted in a similar fashion between the two. Upon taking a closer examination of Messmer, he reminds me of Filianor from Dark Souls 3. Similar abandonment from their parental figure with being left at the end of the world, as well as being tasked with holding some kind of seal or key to keep something safe or hidden. Messmer with his kindling blocks access to essentially the pathway to becoming a god, and Filianor blocking access, or in her case protecting the literal end of the world. Both seemingly were unknown children and were given an important task. Item descriptions suggest that Gwyn said he would one day return for Filianor, whereas it's unknown if Marika made a similar promise to her son Messmer. It would seem that Messmer is still waiting even if that promise was never made to him. When taking a look at Melina and Messmer, it can be assumed that they were the most unloved out of all of her children. Both were forgotten and abandoned, likely due to their affinity with fire presenting the greatest threat to the Erd Tree and the Golden Order. They also embody the threats in the form of the Abyssal Serpent and presumably the Glowmide Queen. However, both were used as tools given direct tasks, whereas other siblings did not seem to have much direct order, aside from simply to, quote, make thyself that which ye desire. Melina and Messmer's instructions were much clearer by comparison. Melina was likely the failsafe to initiate the rupture and repair of the world. Messmer's task was to purge the Shadow Realm of the enemies that annihilated Marika's shaman people. With that in mind, it could also be surmised that Marika loved these two the most, or at the very least respected their power since they were given specific orders and were generally kept under wraps for much of the events prior and post-shattering. While they were far from being golden children like Godwyn, they sure left their mark in their own unique and rebellious way. After all, in the worlds of From Software titles, fire never truly fades. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this more rambly type of video. I really wanted to come to some more concrete conclusions on Melina and Messmer, but the DLC ultimately left me with more and more questions, as DLCs typically do. The birth order and obscure timeline really does make things a bit more difficult. Feel free to let me know if I missed anything in the comments below. I'm sure there is something small that could completely change my ideas, which is why I love these games so much, so feel free to let me know. I also welcome any additional theories and ideas into the mix. If you like my thoughts on From Software titles as well as other well-known titles from time to time, consider subscribing to the channel as well as giving the video a like. Every little bit is greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I will see you mongrel intruders in the next one. Take care.